Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Everyone, welcome to our Tuesday, February 16, Sioux Falls City Council meeting. Thanks for being here tonight. Special welcome to Troop 711, the Boy Scouts. They grilled me before the meeting and asked some great questions, so glad you guys could be here. We'll go ahead and get started tonight by reading our roll, please.
Council members Neitzer.
Here.
Selberg. Here. Sale.
Here.
Starr.
Here.
Brecky.
Here.
Erickson. Jensen.
Here.
Kiley.
Here.
All right, back with us tonight to give our invocation is Tom Rooney with the Direct Line Prayer Center. Tom, thanks for being back with us. I'd ask that you rise for the invocation and then stay standing for our Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your goodness, your mercy, and your kindness. And God, I'm reminded of your word that instructs us, Lord, to first of all, to make prayer and supplication for all people, for all who are in authority, with the purpose, God, of living our lives in peace and quiet and all godliness. Your word tells us that this is good and acceptable in your sight. Father, we just ask you to lead by your Spirit the people of the city council, God, the mayor, that you would give them wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to establish our city in good foundation, God, that you would continue the good work that's been begun here. And Lord, even as we look at the conditions outside, we also recognize that there are many, Lord, that are suffering during this time of extreme cold and severe weather. We pray for their protection, and God, we ask you to meet the needs of our social welfare services. That you would have your hand upon them, that our city would be a city that protects those that are in need and makes supply for those that have needs as well. We ask this now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
United
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks, Tom. We now, I'll invite Councilor Starr forward, and we have a presentation to make. Linda, you want to come up?
And your faithful assistant, absolutely. That's part of the whole thing. Oh, absolutely. Good. Yes, come on. Actually, why don't you step in between? Queen makes a better photo op if you guys are on this side. There you go. This side? Yes, absolutely. This is one of the best things that we do at the council. Several times a year is to recognize superheroes in the community. Yep. Well, we'll stop long enough to take a good picture too before we're done. So tonight, Linda Bill has been a volunteer in leadership roles for several organizations and events over the years and has donated countless hours to promote and improve the quality and enjoyment of life for our community. She's been a leader in the Chamber of Commerce her entire adult career, including the Diplomats and ambassadors, and was awarded the prestigious Bernie DeWald Chamber Spirit Award. She has worked many years with Go Red for Women and served on their board. She chaired the South Dakota Symphony League and created South Dakota Business Leaders Have Talent, which, along with spearheading several other events for Realtors for Kids, has raised thousands of dollars for each of these groups. Linda has served on many other boards, such as Excel Energy, Forward Sioux Falls, and United Way, to just name a few. She is consistently promoting our great city. Linda attended Dakota State University and is a certified optician, and for the past 20 years has been a successful broker realtor. She has been married to Tom for 30 plus years and is a grandmother and a mother. Congratulations on this award tonight, Linda. Thank you. Let you hold that. That will make a great photo op. Mayor, did you have a few words to add?
I don't have a few words other than Linda is the just general woman about town. You see her at every chamber ribbon cutting. You see her at every event. You're very involved in our community. I think this is very fitting that we can honor you. So you probably don't see Tom much because she's flying all over town all the time, right, Tom? So, but we thank you for all your service and all the contributions you give to our great city. So, thank you.
It's an honor.
Oops, let's get one more. I think Jim's the official photographer.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We're good.
Did I smile?
All right, congratulations, Linda. Thanks for being here tonight. We'll move on to approval of our consent agenda, please.
So moved.
Second, Salberg. All right, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Nitzert, seconded by Salberg. Any discussion on that? Councilor Nitzert.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll do, I'm jumping ahead to the regular agenda.
Got it. All right, any other discussion on this one? All right, we'll take a vote on it, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg. Yes. Sale.
Yes.
Starr. Yes. Brecky.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Next item, please.
Item 35, approval of the regular agenda.
All right, look for a motion to approve the regular agenda, please.
So moved. Nitzert.
Second, Sale.
All right, motion by Nitzert, seconded by Sale to approve this. Councilor Nitzert, you have an amendment on this.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend the regular agenda by moving item 53 immediately before item 36.
Second. All right, motion by Nitzert to amend with item 53 before 36, and that's seconded by Selberg. Any discussion here, council? All right, let's vote on that amendment, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Before we continue on with our regular agenda, just want to review public input for our agenda items coming up here. Oh, I'm sorry, we still got that's just the amendment. Sorry, we're back to the main motion as amended. Any other amendments? All right, let's take a vote on that then.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, the motion as amended passes. Now we're on to my spiel. For our agenda items, comments are limited to 3 minutes unless the item is being presented for final adoption, in which case public input will be limited to 5 minutes. For all regular agenda items, comments are limited to the agenda item under consideration only. And during the general public input portion of the meeting, comments will be no more than 3 minutes per person and limited to topics which do not involve agenda items appearing earlier in the agenda, as comments will already have been received for those items. So with that, we'll move on to the item that was amended and moved, item 53.
Item 53, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into Amendment 1 to the first amended management and operating agreement between the city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota and Washington Pavilion Management Incorporated. Sponsors the mayor.
All right. Good evening, Sean.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Before you start, I just want to also mention that Chris Hill was ill and couldn't be here tonight, and he was bummed that he couldn't be here. So he wanted to make sure that his absence was not perceived as anything other than just being gone tonight. So someone from the band is here. So great. Thank you, ma'am. We'll probably hear from you in a minute.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sean Pritchard, Director of Finance. The item before you this evening is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an amendment to the city's agreement between the city and Washington Pavilion Management, Inc. The purpose of the amendment is to transfer the management of the City of Sioux Falls Municipal Band from the city over to the Washington Pavilion. We did cover this at informational last week, so I'll keep my remarks fairly brief here for you. And just to note that this is a culmination of a recommendation that had been brought forward by the Municipal Band Task Force that was assembled by the council and then was approved by the council as a recommendation coming forward. We began negotiations and discussions with the Washington Pavilion very quickly on this because we know that timing-wise this needed to be moved forward in order for the Municipal Band to be able to go forward with their season this year. Just a quick summary. Our existing management agreement with the Washington Pavilion is a 5-year agreement. There's 2 years left on this agreement, so this amendment lasts for 2 years, and then we will go back into negotiations and discussions with the Washington Pavilion to extend beyond the 5 years. So it is a separate amendment to the existing agreement. It does transfer the management exclusively to the Washington Pavilion. It also transfers the funding that was allocated in the amount of $112,000 in the budget for 2021. As well as anticipated appropriation for 2022 when that comes forward in the next budget this summer. It does allow us, the city still retains all of the property related to the band, including any capital assets, but the maintenance of that is transferred over to the Washington Pavilion. It's very similar to our existing agreements with them for all of the capital assets that they manage for us on our behalf. It would make all personnel of the band employees going forward of the Washington Pavilion, so they would no longer be employees of the city. And then there's provisions for priority usage, both for the city's showmobile, as well as the band shells at McKinnon Park and at Terrace Park. If there's any further questions regarding the agreement, I'd be happy to answer those. We also have Director Carney from the Director of Parks and Recreation with us tonight, as well as Darren Smith, the Director for Washington Pavilion.
All right, thank you, Sean, for that. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Scott Harris from Sioux Falls. Actually find it kind of funny, you know, we had to solve this problem with the municipal band and the funding, which we didn't really solve. It seems like there's a lot of things going on in the city where we just like to rearrange the deck chairs to make it look like we're doing something. I don't know what we accomplished here, really. We moved the municipal band over to the pavilion, but we're still funding it. It's just done a little bit different. Had to rewrite a bunch of contracts, get a bunch of lawyers involved, have a bunch of task force meetings, and we really aren't saving the taxpayers one penny. Better solution would have just sat down with Chris Hill and maybe the municipal band and some other people and said, what do you want? Let's make this a little bit better. You're still gonna get funded, you're still gonna get the money. Maybe let the municipal band manage themselves. That would have been a great idea. Puzzled. I really don't know what we accomplished. We had a lot of meetings, we did a lot of talking, we did a lot of fussing. The media did a lot of stories. And we're still paying to fund the municipal band, which was the reason why we were going to do this to begin with, was because it was costing us too much, apparently. And we needed to do something, and we're still paying for it. Now, I'm all for funding it, and I don't have a problem with it going to the pavilion. I'm just trying to figure out what really was accomplished. With all the problems we have going on in our city, with COVID, with vaccinations, with businesses, infrastructure, we wasted all this time moving one little entity from the Parks Department over to the pavilion and saved no money? We probably spent $100,000 doing this. This is a prime example of government, local government, wasting the taxpayers' time on stupid stuff. Like I said, the municipal band needed a better deal. Could have been accomplished by having a couple meetings with them. That's it. But instead, we're going to make it look like we're doing something. When people are dying in our community of COVID, when we say, oh, government can't handle vaccinations. We got to let the hospitals do that. What we handle is municipal bans and moving them from one department to another, saving no money and accomplishing really nothing. But it's fun for the news, because then they don't have to really cover the real topics, like giving away $94 million on a slush fund to the Development Foundation, because they haven't really covered that. But it's fun talking about the municipal ban. It's been a blast. I'm going to talk about it for 5 minutes, to tell you the truth, since I have the time. I just sometimes wonder, when one of you are going to raise your hands when something like this comes up again and go, really? It's in this department, leave it there, move on. It's a waste of time. To tell you the truth, my experience with the pavilion, I feel sorry for the municipal band. I think they probably had a better deal when they were in the Parks Department. They're going to find out what it's like being underneath the umbrella of the pavilion. And sometimes that's not a real rosy, pretty place to be. But we don't know about that because there's no transparency in the city. They moved their annual meeting to whenever they feel like, in the middle of the afternoon, where nobody knows when it's happening. So nobody knows really what's financially or whatever else is going on over there, even though the taxpayers subsidize the hell out of the place. And we're going to build a $4 million roof or something. But, this is what we do. Screw around with the dumb stuff, the little stuff, when we should be actually paying attention to what's really going on in this community. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak tonight? Come on up, ma'am. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Angie Larson. I am here tonight on behalf of Christopher Hill since he wasn't feeling well. He asked me just to read this statement on his behalf. I am looking forward to this new arrangement for the Sioux Falls Municipal Band. I believe that such an arrangement has the potential to keep the band thriving well into the future. Thank you to the members of the band task force for their hard work and to those who worked out the details to make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Appreciate you being here. Anyone else here to speak on this tonight? All right. Not seeing anyone else. Counselors, do you have any questions for Sean? I see Darren from the pavilion is here as well, or Angie. All right. Not hearing any. Do we want to make a motion on this item?
Move approval.
Second, Sale.
All right, motion by Selberg, seconded by Sale to approve item 53. Any discussion on that one then, council? All right, hearing none, we'll take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move to our next item.
Item 36, new 2021 retail wine and cider license for Minnehaha Country Club, 3101 West 22nd Street. Item 37, new 2021 retail wine and cider license requesting off-sale use only for Houndstooth House LLC, Houndstooth House, 201 West 37th Street, CUP not required. Item 38, transfer of 2021 packaged liquor license from Davlon Incorporated, shopping cart 4209 West 12th Street to MG Oil Company, Corner Pantry 23, 4209 West 12th Street. Item 39, transfer of 2021 packaged liquor license from Cubbies Incorporated, Cubbies, 1900 West 12th Street to Cosmic LLC, Circle S, 1900 West 12th Street. And item 40, special one-day liquor license for T-Slat Incorporated to be operated at the Sanford Event Barn, 2510 East 54th Street North for a NAWIC mixer fundraiser on March 11th, 2021.
Good evening, Jamie.
Jamie Palmer with licensing. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, thanks, Jamie. Anyone from the public here to speak on 36 to 40? Council, do you have any questions for Jamie on those items? All right, look for a motion here.
Move to approve, Sale.
Second, Selberg.
All right, motion by Sale, seconded by Selberg to approve 36 to 40. Here, any discussion on that? Hearing none, let's take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Next item, please.
Item 41, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by amending Chapter 53, Publicly Owned Treatment Works, General Provisions, sponsors the mayor.
Good evening, Kurt.
Good evening, Kurt Peppel, Assistant City Engineer. Items 41 through 44 are Public Works related ordinance updates. 41 is Chapter 53, Publicly Owned Treatment Works. Item 42, Trent Lubers will address that. 43 is Chapter 59 for the Water Department regulations, which is a new chapter. And item 44 is Chapter 50, Utilities General. As previously presented, the updates are mainly housekeeping and clarification. Chapter 50, which is an item later on, is a combination of general utility ordinance language and water ordinance language. We are proposing to move that water language to new Chapter 59, so it has a home in its own chapter, similar to what 53 does. At last week's first reading, Councilman Nitzert requested clarification regarding updates to 50.008. I hope we answered your questions. I do have a team here with me, Ryan Johnson, Nick Borns, Paul Bankford. We are here to answer any further questions on these updates. And item 41, again, is just Chapter 53.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Anyone from the public here to speak on item 41 here? Council, do you have questions for Kurt on 41? All right,
Move approval.
Second, Sale.
motion by Selberg, seconded by Sale to approve this item. Any discussion on it? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote, please, Tom.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move on to item 42.
Item 42, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by moving Section 50.023G to Chapter 51, Utility Rates and Charges, and amending Section 51.050 of Chapter 51, Utility Rates and Charges. Sponsors the mayor.
Good evening, Trent.
Good evening, Trent Lubers with the Office of Public Works. As Kurt said, we did some housekeeping changes in Chapter 50, 51, 52, and 53. These changes in Chapter 51 is a move from Chapter 50 to 51 for some collection language. There's no change in the language. It's just a more appropriate section where the rate section is. The other cleanup is a clarification or a change to a rate that we had clarified as the John Morrell and Company rate. We changed that to a large industrial rate, added some criteria as to how a large industrial customer could qualify, and made no changes to the rates whatsoever. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Trent. Anyone from the public here to speak on this one tonight? Council, you have questions for Trent on 42 here?
Move approval. Second, Sale.
All right, we have a motion by Selberg and seconded by Sale to approve item 42. Any discussion here? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Recky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
Okay, that passes 7-0. Item 43, please.
Item 43, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by adding Chapter 59, Water Department Regulations. Sponsors the mayor.
Good evening again, Assistant City Engineer Kurt Peppel. Item 43 is the Chapter 59 Water Department Regulations, which is a new chapter. Again, moving that language out of Chapter 50 into Chapter 59, just so it has its own home, similar to Chapter 53. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item here? Council, you have any questions for Kurt tonight? All right, look for a motion on this one.
Move to approve, Nitzert. Second, Sale.
Motion by Nitzert, seconded by Sale to approve 43. Any discussion here? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Recky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Next item, please.
Item 44, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by amending Chapter 50, Utilities Generally. Sponsors the mayor.
Finally, we have item 44, Chapter 50, and again, just mainly housekeeping clarification. A lot of those changes is moving that water language out into 59. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, anyone from the public here to speak on this one? Councilors, any questions?
Move approval. Second.
All right, motion by Selberg, seconded by Nitzert. Councilor Nitzert, do you have a question on this for Kurt?
I just had a quick clarification I wanted to make. So I did ask about the liability to the city clause that was in there, and just so people know, after looking at it closer and having it explained, it essentially is just rewording and making it less specific to just wastewater. I don't believe the citizens and the ratepayers are in any worse condition than they were before. It's essentially cleanup and rewording to be more accurate. There's no substantive change, and that was my concern. So I have no hesitation to support that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this one then? All right, let's take a vote on it, please, Tom.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Recky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move to item 45.
Item 45, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, establishing the tax increment revenues to be collected and authorizing the payment of tax increment revenues to the Sioux Falls Development Foundation Incorporated in accordance with the Development Agreement for Tax Incremental District Number 23, City of Sioux Falls. Recommendation set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Private applicant, Sioux Falls Development Foundation.
Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Jeff Eckhoff, Director of Planning and Development Services. Thank you again for your time tonight. Before I get started, just so you know, there are some guests in the audience. The applicant, Bob Munt, President of the Development Foundation, and Dean Diezik and Mike Gray are here with him as his staff. From the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Joe Fiala, the Development Director, is here, and I believe Commissioner Westra is going to be here as well and has a few brief comments at the end of our presentation. Todd Meyer-Henry is the legal counsel for the Development Foundation is here, and Brendan Riley, representing the city in this issue with Davenport Evans, is also in the audience as well, of course, Dustin Powers. So I'll give my brief remarks. Dustin will give his presentation. The commissioner will have a few words, and then we'll all stand ready for questions at that time, if that's okay. So we've certainly stood before this body before and talked about TIF, and tonight the big difference between a traditional TIF is this is the large and the sizable opportunity that this project brings to the city of Sioux Falls. Across the state, TIFs are traditionally used, and in my 25 years of being around economic development, I can tell you I've visited with literally every economic development office in the state of the Class 1 cities. And most of them, if not all of them, have used TIF or their fundraising mechanism that's similar to Forest Sioux Falls to put in infrastructure with their economic development partners and the local development foundations. It's a very common practice. Those communities that are competing for these projects realize that oftentimes the land price does not cover all the development costs. And so their ROI comes in the terms of jobs and tax base and capital investment in their communities. Sioux Falls, I worked at the Development Foundation for almost 16 years, and we were somewhat immune to that because we were Sioux Falls and we were kind of the big dog in the fight, if you will, and we didn't have to, or I should say that the sales prices pretty much covered those land costs. Those land costs have escalated, and we're looking at the scale that we're talking about tonight, and the market becomes more competitive and our competitors become bigger. That gap is fast shrinking, and thus the need for the TIF to get out ahead of it, to be prepared for the long term, and be poised for the future opportunities that are going to come to us with Foundation Park. So 3 unique things about this TIF: the size and the scope. Number one, we're talking about a 540-acre TIF district, with 80 acres of that being the Amazon facility, with the increment we're using for the majority of this work. 460 unimproved acres that have grading, water, sewer, streets, all of that needs to be put in ahead of time in order to be shovel ready for projects. It's a huge project. We're used to seeing very site-specific TIFs. Downtown, this site, this project, this is a development, 460 acres. So the scope is large and larger than anything we've taken on before. The other thing that's unique within the scope of this project is the Economic Development Competitiveness Fund, which is at $30 million. And Dustin will cover this in the development agreement, and the TIF plan is a very specific list of things that can be used for, and also specifies that those improvements must be within the district, and that the city and the Development Foundation together will approve those projects prior to them being submitted for reimbursement or for certification through our office. So that oversight is in place and allows the flexibility for the city to designate who those representatives will be as we review those projects. And so that's all been built in and baked into the plan. You'll see that, and again, Dustin will cover that very specifically. The second thing is we're working with that's unique is we're working with the Development Foundation. Typically, we work with private developers on specific projects downtown. Again, this is our nonprofit economic development partner, and it's very common practice across the state. In fact, all the Class 1 cities use this model on a very regular basis. And these guys have been around for 60 years and have developed over 13,000 acres of land and understand how this business works. And then finally, I would just say that this represents a larger opportunity than we've had before. We're no longer competing with Aberdeen and Sioux City. We are now competing with the Kansas City, Omaha, Des Moines, and cities like that. And this takes us to the next level. And you heard that in Bob Munt's comments during the informational session. So with that, I will introduce Dustin Powers, who will take you through the plan and the development agreement. And then we'll hear from Commissioner Westra, and then we'll all stand ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, Dustin.
Evening, Council, Mayor. Dustin Powers with the Planning Department. Tonight, we're going to go through the main elements of the project plan that are also incorporated within the development agreement. So tonight is a first reading for the development agreement. The project plan is an exhibit within the development agreement. And ultimately, when we move this to second reading, what you'll see on the council agenda is a second reading of the development agreement, but we'll also have a resolution approving the project plan. Both the district boundaries and the project plan are approved by resolution based on codified law. And if you recall back from September of last year, we actually brought those district boundaries in front of you for your support, and those were adopted at our September meeting in 2020. And really to really kind of follow up from what Jeff said, one of the reasons we wanted to create that district early on, before we knew the full contents of the project plan, was that we were seeing a lot of momentum with economic development projects and their attraction to Sioux Falls as well as the state of South Dakota, and especially Foundation Park. And so when we were looking at the area, obviously establishing the district early was important, because then we could capture any of the tax increment that would be created by future projects that would occur within the district. And since the time of us creating the district, there has been some announcements and some development occurring within the district, which has started to generate, or will start to generate, some of the increment that we use to really develop the project plan that we have in front of you, and that's included in the development agreement. So when we look at the district boundaries and the area that was created back in September, as you can see, there's approximately 9 parcels that are located within the district, and currently those 9 parcels generate approximately $70,000 worth of property taxes. What you'll see based on current development that's happening within the park, plus our future projections of development that will occur across the remaining 460 acres of the district, we're projecting by the year end, or the 20-year anniversary of the TIF district, that we'll be collecting $13.5 million in property taxes. So the difference between the new taxes generated within the district and really the base value taxes, that $70,000, that's what's called the tax increment, and that's what's going to be used as part of the TIF to pay for the project cost identified within the project plan. The Sioux Falls Development Foundation is requesting the $94,371,313 plus the financing costs associated with that within the TIF district. And what those funds will go to, and we'll go into more detail on the next slides, but that'll go to cover the infrastructure and site prep, the platting and sanitary sewer cost recoveries, engineering and other testing costs, as well as financing costs, and then that economic development competitiveness fund Jeff mentioned earlier. So when we look at, again, we're talking about a very large area. The entire district encompasses 540 acres, minus the Amazon site. What we're really looking at is development of 460 acres, which is equivalent to 350 football fields for our size comparison. And I recall back when we did the informational, Bob also showed an image of this district being larger than our entire downtown area. So again, just some scale for you. To really provide shovel-ready sites, though, we have to add the roads, the water, sewer, grading, regional detention, as well as the additional rail sites. And these are all identified costs within the project plan, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we continue to move forward here. So again, one of the main items in the project plan is the Economic Development Competitiveness Fund. And the purpose of that fund is to strategically support future identifiable costs that are located within the district that are associated with increased build-out. So when we talk about this being really a district-wide TIF, the way I look at this is all of those items that I identified on the previous slide, those infrastructure, roads, sewer, water, that just gets us really shovel-ready. But to get a site build ready, there's extra costs associated with that. So every individual business or company that comes in to develop a future site, they all have other costs associated with those projects. So when we compare this to maybe more of a site-specific TIF, which we're more common with here in Sioux Falls, those sites are already build ready. So those TIFs are coming forward and they're identifying those more build ready items. And that's really what this EDC fund is meant to accomplish, is those site-specific improvements that we really can't talk about or know about right now because we don't know what those companies are, how big their properties are going to be, and how much future uses or expenditures that would have associated with things like additional grading additional water and sewer capacities that we may not already have included within the district. So again, this sets us up to look at those future identifiable costs that are within the district associated with those projects, and how can we use this fund to help support those costs. So again, as Jeff mentioned, the EDC fund will be oversight by the city and as well as the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, and we have outlined that in the agreement. We do get fairly specific in the agreement. If you read the section, I believe it's 208 in the agreement as well, it's also located within the project plan. Really identify and label out what those site-specific improvements can be, how that can help with competitive land pricing, as well as all those other items associated with that future use of that fund. Again, having the oversight between the city as well as the Development Foundation before those expenses are used through the fund. So when we talk about the project plan, there's a number of elements that are identified within codified law that need to be addressed. I won't go through all of these items in a lot of detail, but after each bullet point, there's a section referencing the project plan and which section addresses each of these items. It talks about the location of all the public works improvements, so those have been identified within the plan. The economic feasibility study, so that's really looking at, is the increment that's going to be collected going to pay off the TIF request, which we've identified it will. The detailed estimate of all project costs, so those can include both TIF related costs as well as non-TIF related costs. Fiscal impact statement, that talks about, and we'll have that on the next couple slides, just related to how this will impact all the taxing entities that are involved with this before and then also after the TIF expiration. Description of the financing, so this is a developer-funded TIF. The Sioux Falls Development Foundation will be financing all these improvements. Also included in the project plan are just maps showing the existing uses, the proposed improvements, zoning, a list of any changes that are needed to our zoning or our comprehensive plan. Again, estimated non-project costs, as well as if we're displacing any people. There are no residents in this area that we're displacing by doing this TIF district or this project. So talk a little bit about TIF eligible expenses. This is in the project plan as well as the agreement. What you'll see is on the right-hand side is really a list of all the expenses and kind of broken out as we see them. And the estimates that are provided for each of those items. But to really summarize, we look at kind of the left-hand side. There's $50.4 million that are dedicated to infrastructure improvements in that site prep. That includes 26,000 plus linear feet of roads, sewer, water, 500,000 cubic yards of industrial grade roads, earth and environmental work. So again, that's just getting us to a level of shovel readiness, not necessarily getting us all the way to that build ready aspect that a future building or company would need. And again, ultimately this would provide 460 acres of shovel ready sites. We also have separated out is kind of more the platting, sanitary sewer costs, the financing, the engineering. That totals about $52.3 million. And then also the Economic Development Competitiveness Fund, which we've talked about, is that $30 million really set aside to support the costs and activities associated with future development out in the park. So when we do the fiscal impact and when we look at any TIF project, what we do is we basically look at what's a stabilized year within the TIF project. So after a project or two have gotten online, what's the economic impact of that to the taxing entities? So ultimately right now, as I stated, there's $70,000 being collected that's distributed between Minnehaha County, Tri-Valley School District, the Water District, as well as the City of Sioux Falls. So this looks out at year 2027 as one of those stabilized years, kind of mid-course for the TIF, and just shows you the impact that this will have on that mid-course projection. Ultimately, what we're projecting at the end of the 20-year period is actually $13.5 million being collected. And again, if you recall back from the informational, these are fairly conservative numbers, What we typically do within our project plans is we follow a more conservative approach on what we think is going to happen out there, just to, again, approve the financial feasibility of the TIF and that it'll be paying off. But we do believe that these numbers will be much higher once the 460 acres are fully developed. So when we look at the project plan, what are the considerations that we have to make? You'll see this on the resolution for the project plan that'll come forward at the next meeting, but ultimately we need to look at a couple different things. One, is it consistent with our Shape Sioux Falls comprehensive plan as well as our zoning ordinance? When you look at the properties currently within the district and within Foundation Park, you can see that really that southern half is already zoned industrial. All of this area has been annexed into the city, so is really part of our, consistent with our comprehensive plan and our growth area for this area. And we have identified industrial as the land use for this area of town as well. So ultimately, we will see a few rezonings come forward for that northern half as development starts to occur. That'll make it consistent with, again, our comprehensive plan and our zoning ordinance moving forward. We also have to look at the feasibility of the project plan. As I had outlined, based on the increment that's being projected through the project plan, we do believe that the project plan is feasible and that ultimately the TIF request will pay off before the 20-year expiration. So when we review TIFs here, there's a number of things we look at. What are the project financials? What is the gap necessitating that? Obviously, this being with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, our nonprofit economic development partner, there's definitely a need to support this type of investment in our community and to assist them to really open up, the 460 acres that we're talking about. We've already went through the uses of the TIF funding. We also look at the significance of the project and the economic impact. Obviously, this is going to provide shovel-ready sites across 460 acres in Foundation Park North, which will lead to an increase in taxes and valuation that will be out in the district, will result in direct job growth as we continue to see businesses and jobs grow in the economic development park. And then ultimately, anytime we review TIF, we look at whether or not it will stimulate and develop the general economic welfare and prosperity of the state, which again, based on all the factors that we've already discussed, we believe it does that. To look a little bit more locally and historically on how we've looked at TIF in the past, there's really several ways you can look at TIF, but really in Sioux Falls, really the following purposes and areas of really how we've kind of categorized our TIFs over the years. Do they encourage redevelopment of deteriorated or blighted areas? Do they stimulate economic development in the community by assisting projects that support kind of that long-term economic vitality of Sioux Falls? Or do they stimulate increased private investment in areas that may not have otherwise seen investment at all, or we can increase the investment that someone's willing to make based on the significance of these projects and the additional tax revenues that they'll generate for all the taxing entities moving forward. So when we look at our review of the project plan, its consistency with our comprehensive plan, and the feasibility of the tax increment to pay off the TIF request, the city staff is recommending that the use of $94,371,313 plus the financing cost is adequate and appropriate to support this project moving forward. We've had several meetings and discussions with the development, Sioux Falls Development Foundation, as well as the state moving this forward. As shown on the previous slide, again, our evaluation focuses on a number of areas, that anticipated need, the uses of the funds, as well as the significance of the economic impact. And again, we believe all three of these areas have been met. So based on our recommendation that the project plan can support the $94 million plus the financing cost, we have put together a development agreement, which is what the first reading of tonight is addressing. This will be a developer-funded TIF, which means that the developer will be financially responsible for financing and the repayment of these improvements. Any of the expenses as we identified in the EDC fund or the Economic Development Competitiveness Fund, that's been addressed within the development agreement, that those uses of those funds will be reviewed by the city as well as the Development Foundation prior to those being certified by the city. So ultimately, again, this development agreement addresses all those items and will limit the maximum payout to $94,371,313 plus the financing costs, which both amounts are capped within the TIF agreement. So before we enter into questions, I was going to introduce Commissioner Westra. He did want to come up and provide a few comments on behalf of the project.
All right. Thank you, Dustin. Good evening, Commissioner.
Hey, good evening. Steve Westra, Commissioner in the Governor's Office of Economic Development. I'll be brief here this evening. A couple of things. First, I wanted to say thank you to all of you for your service. And second, I want to say thank you to all of the leaders and the leadership that has gotten Foundation Park to where it is today. We have an incredible asset before us that is not only important to the city of Sioux Falls, but it's also critically important to the state of South Dakota. So I thank you for all of that. This TIF tonight really does one thing going forward, and that is it continues to be the economic engine or driver for the next generation for the city of Sioux Falls and the state of South Dakota. GOED has a very strong relationship with both the Sioux Falls Development Foundation and all of you, the city of Sioux Falls. And so with that, on behalf of the Governor's Office, I would strongly ask for your support on this. I too will remain around this evening for any further questions, but I would ask for your strong consideration. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Westra. Appreciate you being here. All right. We'll move into any questions for any of the folks involved with this tonight from the Development Foundation, GOED, city staff. Questions? Any questions on, oh, so I'm sorry, I need to go to public input. I wouldn't forget, you guys are giving me the stink eye like I was missing something. Come on forward, sir, we'll take public input on this item.
Scott Harrisman, Sioux Falls. First off, I want to know why appointed staff of the city even has the authority to recommend approval of a $94 million TIF. They do not. They give the pros and cons, and then you guys make up your decisions. I also want to know why a planning commission that consists of 9 members who've never had a full, for 14 months, have had a 9-member board at a meeting. 4 members approved the TIF out of a 9-member board. Questionable. I also want you to take some facts into consideration. Sioux Falls has one of the lowest unemployment rates of any city of our size in the nation. We have some of the highest record-breaking building permits in the nation. We don't have enough housing for people. We're struggling constantly to build more housing. They can't even keep up. And we want to incentivize businesses that are not from here, who pay very little in federal income taxes, if any, from foreign countries, who take their profits and shoot them straight out of town, just like the event center did. If anything, we shouldn't be incentivizing anyone. We should be using $94 million in TIF tax rebates, because that's what it is, to fix up our own infrastructure. Not building egg roll factories that pay $15 an hour in a cornfield and go straight over to South Korea with their profits. It makes no sense. It's baffling. If we were struggling as a city to bring in jobs and we had high unemployment and we had slums and we had nobody was building anything, I'd say, yeah, we need to get some TIFs out there to incentivize some business. We don't have any of that. We have the exact opposite of that. The exact opposite, folks. We should be fixing up our infrastructure. I told a guy, I'll finish with this. Guy asked me once, he says, you know, Minnesota Avenue looks really bad. Why don't they do something with it to make it look better? I said, I moved here in 1991. I said, you want to know what Minnesota Avenue looked like in 1991? exactly how it looks today. I want you to think about that. Almost 30 years, and we've done nothing to fix up our core and our proper, and to boost up local business, not egg roll factories in South Korea. Of course, you all look down. You're going to approve it because that's what you do, because that's who bankrolled all of your campaigns, was the banksters and developers in town. You'll get a big old yes from you guys.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this tonight?
Sioux Falls. I talked to an investor that's investing on some property over there. I want to caution when we develop there, because Amazon, when Amazon comes, this is not going to be a union, so their pay for their employees are going to be very low. The developers and investors, when they want to build out there, you have to consider, when you want to house these people, these individuals and these workers, Amazon is a felon-friendly place. So when these developers want to develop and put apartments and everything else up there, we got to make sure that it's cost efficient for these workers out there. These people that is going to be working for Amazon, it's not going to be able to afford $900 and $1,100 for a one-bedroom apartment. I hate to tell you, we're not going to glorify this. Amazon's going to pay $10 to about $14 an hour. They're not going to go competitive with John Morrell, because John Morrell is union. Amazon is not union. So when these developers build, please consider to make these rental properties felon-friendly, because we're going to have people on parole working there. We're going to have refugees. We're going to have everybody in God's creation of every source out there. But this is not going to be a big corporate job for workers here. So I'm not saying if I'm for TIFs or against TIFs. I'm not going to get into the politicalness of this, but I know that there's some investors that are going to be building out there, and so I'm just throwing this out to everybody else that I haven't spoke to, of investors and putting money towards properties out there, that you need to consider to have these rental properties felon-friendly.
Anyone else here to speak tonight on this item? All right, now we can move into those questions you guys were dying to ask. Councilor Sale, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just a couple of things I need some clarification on. One would be the financing costs. I see that it's listed at 5%. I think, I know that money's not that expensive today in the world. So if I could get an explanation of why 5% in that is in there, and what is a realistic explanation, or what can we expect financing costs to be?
Well, I might ask Mike or Bob to come up to talk about specifically the financing costs, but typically in any of the TIF agreements, we do identify a financing cost associated with that. Obviously, there's going to be some caveats to that as well, because when we talk about the request of $94 million and the improvements that's going to go to, that's actually going to be phased in over time too. So they're going to finance this in multiple different facets, I believe. So again, they're going to be pulling from a couple different sources to actually make this work. But again, we do typically agree to a finance cost up front within the agreement.
Okay, well, I would strongly urge you to get the lowest interest rate you possibly can and keep the council updated on how that goes. My second question, a little clarification on the competitive fund that you have $30 million in there. And I know that the role of the council is to approve expenditures and we approve the budget. So what kind of oversight will the city council have on that $30 million fund once it's identified by the foundation park that they need it? City staff said, we agree. Will that then come to the council for a secondary opinion, or are we giving you carte blanche today and next reading to spend that $30 million?
Well, I think really, when we talk about approval of the TIF agreement and those funds, we are asking for that $30 million to be funded and approved today. Ultimately, what we would do is we would review those as those expenses come in and sign off on those with the Development Foundation. But with all of these expenses, obviously we track them internally and are able to report back to the City Council as those come forward. So we wouldn't necessarily be bringing back each individual item moving forward to request approval on the use of those funds, but we would continue to report out of the use of those funds to the City Council.
And I appreciate that answer, and that's kind of what I read into it. I will tell you, I do have a little bit of a problem with that. That is, I mean, $30 million, to just say, yeah, it's going to be a big project and there might be some additional expenses, so we're building in $30 million without approval of the council is concerning to me. And I know we have time between the second reading to address that, but.
Jeff, you want to speak to that item, Jeff?
Please. So, Councilor Sale, that's a good question. I think if you think about this in the process of our budget, annual budget, where the council debates, reviews, debates some more, and then provides basically the guideposts for expenditures, and you're giving us basically spending authority. And the administration then is responsible for prudently and effectively spending that money and then reporting back to the council how it was spent. If the council doesn't like the way it was spent, then the next budget cycle or somewhere down the road, you would certainly let us know that. So in this respect, that's the same process we would anticipate going through. It's reviewed by city staff, it's reviewed by the Development Foundation. We come together on approval because we've given expenditure authority within these guidelines. If you look into, I believe it's page 5 of the development agreement, there's a chart that, and Dustin showed the chart with all the line item expenses on it. And then underneath that, there's a narrative that talks specifically about there's probably 8 different things that the funds can be spent on. And so it's specified there how that Economic Development Competitiveness Fund would be used. And then the amounts are not assigned to each item because it depends on what projects come up, what needs they have. So the guardrails are there for the $30 million. The guidance is there on the specific things we would spend it on. But again, we are asking you for spending authority for us to do our job as administrative arm and prudently spend those funds in a way that advances the goals and mission of the Development Foundation and of this fund.
And Director, I appreciate that. And I know it's been done and things like that in the past, but this is such a large number. I mean, it's different than me slipping my granddaughter $5 and say, spend it, I trust you, $30 million for that. It just causes me a little bit of pause, just like the financing charge at 5%. I understand how important this whole thing is to the future of City Sioux Falls. It might be easy for us to look right now and say, look how good we've got it. We don't have to plan for the future, and I know this is a plan for our future. So I will support it, but I'm probably going to have to ask a few more questions in the meantime about those two things.
And what I can tell you is I certainly understand the gravity that you bring to that discussion, and certainly pledge to you that we'll do all that we can to make sure the funds are spent appropriately. I think that's always been the mission of this administration and the staff, and we certainly will continue with that. So, again, I appreciate the conversations. It's not lost on us that it's a large sum of money, but it's not lost on us the responsibility that comes with that.
Other questions for any of our experts here? Councilor Neitzer, go ahead.
A couple things. I'd like maybe somebody to elaborate maybe more on the 5%, because I'm not sure whether or not that is out of bounds or not, because knowing a little bit about the development world, depending on whether you're going to banks or you're syndicating or finding investors, their rate of return they may expect may be significantly more than 5%. And so I mean, where did the 5% number come from, and how does that relate to probably what the real world costs that you would expect to find?
I'll let Mike speak to that.
Thanks.
Good evening, councilors. Mike Gray with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation. Thank you for the question, councilor. So I'm not the CFO of the Sioux Falls Development Foundation. He would probably be the better one to really answer this question. What I can tell you is that when we move forward through the project plan with developing the park, we're going to seek the most competitive interest rate that we can get. city practice has been to cap it at 5%. I can tell you that some of the financing we've gotten on infrastructure build out in the southern portion of the park has been less than 5%. So when you look at that cap number in the project plan, 5%, the total number that's capped in the development agreement, again, that's a conservative number. That takes into account how we're going to phase the development. So we're not just taking out $94 million on day one and doing it. We're doing it, taking out financing over the course of 5 years. That's factored in. We also don't have any other funding that would come in that we would normally seek. So that could include aid from the state through a local infrastructure grant program, could include future funds grant program, could include we at the foundation, when we're doing these infrastructure projects, we seek grants from the federal level and the EDA to help us build out roads. We don't take into account any of those sources of revenue, but we fully expect that we will receive some support through those avenues. We've had success with those in the past, and that will help drive down the overall interest cost as well, or the overall financing cost as well. But again, we'll seek a very competitive interest rate when we're moving forward.
And but your reimbursement, if I understand it right, is really, the agreement states 5%. So regardless of your actual captured interest rate, once you take a draw, let's say for $10 million, the clock starts, and each annual year you would be reimbursed 5% of that draw, if the money's available, obviously, in the increment in the special fund, correct?
Yeah, that's a way to interpret the development agreement. That's a way that it could be calculated, really from an ease standpoint for the city to plan going forward. But I have talked with our CFO. We'll plan to track how much in interest is being generated on each of the polls we're making specifically to the improvements in Foundation Park North, and then submit those as part of the certification process.
Okay, and then my next question, I think, is probably for city staff. The competitiveness fund. So as a council, we could probably go everywhere along the continuum from just signing off as it is now, all the way to you have to bring each item to us and we'd have to approve them or over some threshold. I'm not saying I'm for or against either, but that would be the kind of continuum. Another one maybe in the middle could be, and I was looking at our TIF ordinance, maybe somebody could address, somebody said about, we would report to you. What does that mean? I'm not sure, do we get a TIF annual report? I don't think we do. I mean, a bridge in the middle could be that you may be required to bring us an annual report of TIFs, including what they're doing, how much they've paid out. I know our monthly financials has some TIF information, and maybe even we have an annual report of the expenditures made out of them, and I might even just say every TIF, not singling one out. That might be one way to have a guardrail to take a look and see what is it being spent on, and is it matching kind of what we intended? So just thoughts.
Yeah, I think obviously we're open to some of that discussion of how often we come and do those reports. But what I would say is that you're correct on the annual or the monthly report. We do have our financial model in there that shows how much is being collected under each TIF and when that's being paid out. The things that we'll have to talk about with this and when we can actually come forward first is when do those expenses actually happen and when do they occur, because there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to occur, and then we'll probably be getting into some of the funds of the EDC fund. So there probably won't be a whole lot of expenditure of that fund for at least the first couple of years here. So again, we need to kind of evaluate when we'll actually be using those funds, but I'm happy to come forward at an informational or whenever we need to show you how those funds have been used. Typically what happens, and again, this one's a little bit different because it's kind of a larger project, larger scale. The funds are going to be utilized over a longer period of time, but typically when you see like a site-specific TIF that we do, as soon as that project's completed, all of those costs are submitted to the planning department. We certify that those costs were incurred, and then we basically approve ultimately the ultimate amount or whatever the amount incurred was. So obviously we cap that here, but a lot of times the incurred costs exceed what's actually requested. So again, we can come on a, you know, whether that's a biannual or annual basis to kind of give you an update of where this TIF stands. You know, with our partners at the Development Foundation, they come on an annual basis anyway to present as part of their annual agreement, and we just did that, I believe, a week or two ago with the Development Foundation. So we could easily lump it in as part of those conversations too.
Yeah, I think the thing that we're all trying to figure out is what exactly, what is the appropriate role that we should play, because we should be watching out for tax dollars, and obviously these are tax dollars that are going to the special fund and would be reimbursed to, you know, the entity. So we have a responsibility to look over those, because those are tax dollars that we otherwise would have captured in the first 20 years. So we need to look at those. We're also a policy-making body, and we give you direction, but we're not administrative, we're not day-to-day, so I'm not sure that the right role is to be sitting there, you know, approving every single expenditure. That might be going over our particular line, but what is that appropriate amount of oversight so that we can feel comfortable that the tax dollars are being used in the way that we envisioned. So I think that's what we're all trying to get to. I'm totally supportive of the idea. Maybe the last question, that paragraph lists some examples. That was not inclusive though, correct? Those were examples of what it could be used for. I mean, it doesn't have to be just those specific items, as long as it's something that would move forward towards the goal of bringing in new employers or development. There might be something that we haven't even envisioned. So it's more of a example and a vision less than an itemized list.
I would say we've identified as much as we can in terms of what we believe could possibly occur out there based on our knowledge of economic development projects and what could actually be the needs out there. And that's kind of those parameters we put in place. But it doesn't necessarily limit it exactly to that. But again, what we are limiting it to is economic development and the TIF district. So it's not that these funds can be used anywhere for anything. They have to be used within the district for, you know, the outline parameters that we've kind of set forward.
And maybe finally, if it's okay, if somebody could explain, when you say the city will review them, you know, a request to use this development fund, what might that look like? Some sort of ad hoc task force?
Yeah, I think ultimately the reason we left the flexibility there of just saying the city and Sioux Falls Development Foundation, it's really going to be dependent upon what that actual item coming forward is. You know, if we have more need for sewer or water capacity, we're definitely going to want like Director Cotter or someone from Public Works to be involved in those conversations to really have some oversight from the city. Obviously from the planning department, Director Jeff would probably be involved just because you know, we are the oversight to the tax increment finance districts. And again, so we'll pull the appropriate parties forward when those come forward just to make sure that the right people are at the table to help facilitate any discussions need to have on those expenses that'll be incurred for the fund.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Counselor. We got other questions for any of the staff or guests that are here tonight? Go to the phone. Is there anyone on the phone first? Then I'll come to you, Counselor Starr. All right, not hearing anyone on the phone. Counselor Starr, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is probably for Director Eckhoff as we do it. I think following up a little bit on Counselor Sale and Counselor Neitzert, I think what's given us all heartburn is how this $30 million is governed. It's different than anything we've ever done before. I think we've had that discussion. That always makes it a little more difficult to trailblaze a little bit. I think following up on what Counselor Neitzert was talking about is what would make me feel more comfortable if we set this up like the bid board does. We've got a great oversight combination with, I was going to say CVB and I caught myself, so I'm trying to make sure that Experience Sioux Falls with the hotel tax, that there's a counselor that serves on that group. There's a someone from the administration, I believe finance has a seat on that board. They're involved in the process and point out what's going on before it happens. What happens so many times on this council is that we get in on the back end of a deal. where this happens and it's all put together and then it's brought to us and then we look bad if we ask tough questions or we're being inconsistent with or sending mixed messages to partners and those kind of things. And if we don't have that insight at the beginning, then it gets ugly at the end. Would a situation where it was like the bid board with a combination of board members from the Development Foundation, the administration, and the council, kind of given that preliminary approval through the process, get us so that we're not too hands-on, but enough that we're involved in the process? Is that something you could support?
So I understand your question, and you're absolutely right. It's a bold move, right? It's new, and it's groundbreaking, and it's different, and it makes it hard, right? Makes it hard, and I agree. So we actually had that discussion early on. Should we name specifically individuals or positions within the city that should be on this approval group? We talked about council improvement. We talked about all of those things and made the decision through advice with our legal counsel to leave it the way it is so that there's flexibility to, as Dustin mentioned, to put the people on that make the most sense given the circumstances and the requests that come before us. Also for the ability to be nimble and to be quick, because we were working with private development, not a bid board and a long-term plan and for promotion, that type of thing. So it's a little different approach. The other thing that would be, I don't know if it's concerning is the right word, but certainly could be a consideration in the formation of any kind of formal board, is all of a sudden now there's a lot of constraints that happen that don't allow the fund to work as quickly and as easily with prospects. A lot of that information that comes forward in those types of meetings, the trade secrets or financial projections or things like that are protected by state codified law. And so you get into some of those, do you call executive session? And not that you couldn't do that, but you sometimes wonder if it doesn't actually defeat the purpose you're trying to move forward. We believe the language is permissive enough that as the administration can place who they want on those review committees. It can be different for everyone. And in a case where it would be beneficial to have a counselor on there, we could certainly bring one of you on at that time. I know it's a little fuzzy. I know it's
No, it's not fuzzy. It's the council being left out. That's how it feels, is that we're going to be on the sidelines watching, and over the course of the next 20 years, someone's going to be in the mayor's seat that we don't trust as much as we trust the one now. And that is, I think, the reality of the public, and not including the council as part of this process. I don't want day-to-day, but I can sign a non-disclosure.
Yeah.
Just like the people who are volunteers or city employees or, through the process. I'm not talking about 4 people, but I think there should be a couple, at least part of that. Yeah. This really smacks of hiding things from the public. And we're saying to the public, trust us. And then we look around and we see a building collapse and a half-finished parking ramp because we're not asking enough questions and we didn't push hard enough. And we're on the front of the end of this. I don't think I can sell this to the community. I really struggle with what you're asking us to do, to not do our job that we were elected to do. And trust us is fine with a verification. And the verification isn't written in this deal in stone where it needs to be, where I think the public would feel comfortable with it.
When you talk about the job that you're to do and the job that we're to do, we kind of get back to that whole, you set the policy, you set the direction, you give us spending authority, and then the day-to-day is up to us. And we execute, we report back to verify, and if you don't like what we did, you let us know, and we adjust and correct for the next cycle. So I ask you to think about that, and I ask you to think about, again, the ability that if it, on certain projects, we certainly could bring in council members on those types of things. And as far as future mayors, the same could be said for future councils. We could get in a situation where we have council members that have nefarious, or we don't like I guess I had a friend of mine tell me once, you can't pat all the sharp corners in the world. And at some point you have to take that, you have to roll it a little bit, and you have to go with the best guidance and the best design and the best input you can within the lane that you are given to affect that kind of change. And so we can debate, I guess, how far that lane goes, and I understand your concern. It is a lot of money, and it's new. So it's a lot of things together, but I would ask you that the structure we have, we believe, again, with legal counsel, that it's adequate to cover the city and gives us flexibility to bring in who we think is appropriate to help make those decisions.
You know, one of the toughest spots of doing this job, I mean, one of the other examples that pops in my head, the council was supposed to get an annual report of the property tax rebates that we did. We went 10 years without a report coming from the administration. Thankfully, Mayor Tenhaken came in, and one of the first things they did is said, hey, we got to tell the council what's going on. You know, they could have sat on it for another 10 years, just like the previous administrations. And we've got, when we're dealing with this kind of money, the safeguards have to be put in place. And I'm concerned, I'm definitely concerned that the safeguards aren't in place.
And one thing I can tell you is that the idea of that report on not only the repayment and how much has been paid out, but what those expenses are, because what happens, those invoices come in, Dustin certifies them, matches them up. We can certainly create that report for you. That won't be a problem, and it's a good idea, actually. We would like to continue to move that forward.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Neitzer, go ahead.
Are those receipts a matter of public record? I assume they would be. They wouldn't be protected by, I mean, that are submitted to the city. I don't think they would fall under
I would turn to Dustin.
unless it maybe has some, I'm not sure what the state law would say about if there's proprietary or financial information.
I would tend to agree, but I'm not going to overreach. I'm going to ask for help.
I think we probably would need to take a look at that. There is a couple sections of state law that we reference in terms of our application and what's actually public information and what's not. But ultimately, when we review the applications, there are portions of that, the financials that the developers bring forward and stuff that remain proprietary. So I don't know, we'll have to maybe take a look at that. I don't know if them submitting invoices and the pricing that they get is considered proprietary information or not.
Yeah, I'd want to take a look as well. I'm not going to opine, as we say, I'm just not sure. So.
Okay.
I would say typically we haven't shared those. We have certified those and shared what those expenditures or the amounts of those expenditures were, but maybe not the actual paper document of the invoice. It would maybe be the one thing we'd need to look at.
And not knowing what the content of those typically are and having state law in front of me, I can't answer it either. I was just curious if that was.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that though.
Okay, and then the other thing that may be helpful for the council to think about as well is 406 examination of records. Developer will allow city to conduct examination and copy records. I assume, it says the city, I would assume that would include our audit division. We could do an audit of this TIF. For example, we do management compliance agreements every year where we look to see, are you following what the agreement stipulates? For example, that the outside entity is submitting receipts properly and they're spending our money in the right ways and all of these things. I would assume that would give our internal audit division plus our audit ordinance full access to do that if we so choose.
Yeah, I believe so. And again, that section that you did reference obviously does give us the ability to examine, those records if needed. But again, we'd probably want to get clarification on, depending on what the request was for whether it's through the audit or through the agreement.
Yeah, I think that would be good to get clarification on. I suspect we probably can, but I would like to know, because that would be something 5 years down the road where our audit division could do an audit, and you can call it a compliance audit, for example, to make sure that the expenditures are going towards what we envision they should, and that they are appropriate and they're documented, and all of the things you would do in a
Correct.
compliance audit.
And I believe a previous section in there talks about, I want to say it's section 207 and 208 kind of address kind of the certification process as well, if you want to take a look at that for your reference as well. So that's them submitting that information to us at the planning department and essentially certifying that those costs have been incurred. So.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions tonight on this item before we get a motion on the floor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Counselor Kiley.
Thank you very much. Dustin, if you would just stay there for a second. I want to do a follow-up question regarding what a question Counselor Neitzer raised. I believe it is well defined what the $30 million, the criteria for using the $30 million, that is already defined, and it will not be expanded upon once this is authorized by the council. Is that correct? Let's clear that up.
Yeah, I would say that we've identified the categories in which those funds and expenses can be used. Obviously, when you read those categories, it does give some flexibility within kind of some of the categories when we talk about supporting the economic development projects there. But again, we have confined it to kind of those items listed and those uses identified for the EDC fund.
And you will not be expanding upon those categories as we move into another year 2 or year 3 or year 4. That you feel that those are well defined at this point in time.
Yes, we believe those are well defined.
Other questions, Counselor Kiley?
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you, Dustin. You know, we authorize annual budgets that far exceed $30 million. And once we authorize that, then it is up to the administration. We don't administer it. We authorize it. And I'm not certain how this is necessarily different and how it could be said that the council is being left out of this process. It is our duty to ask the questions now and to get the clarification as we just have. It has been stated that we will get reports, and I would suggest to those that have concerns about how the $30 million is going to be used and is eventually used, if we have concerns about that, in addition to the reports given to us by the administration, that as Councilor Neitzer pointed out, that we could put this on our annual audit plan. Future councils could add that yearly if they wish to and desire to do so. And I think that would be well within our ability to ask our internal audit division to verify those expenditures. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, any other questions for any of our experts here before we move to a discussion? Go ahead, Counselor Starr.
Dustin, Mr. Powers, you sat down for just long enough to ask me to come back, or to get you to come back. So following up on what Counselor Kiley said, can you pull that back up from your presentation, how it's defined? There you go, that'd be faster.
This paragraph just under the chart there really identifies what we're talking about. Obviously at the beginning, the developer acknowledges and agrees that the TIF eligible project class, including but not limited to the Economic Development Competitiveness Fund, as established by the project, may be used solely for the benefits of projects, businesses, and developments located or to be located within the TIF district. The EDC fund was designed to be flexible and enable the developer to advance in the recruitment and retention of businesses that are considering locating or expanding within the TIF district. And the uses of the EDC fund are to pay for future identifiable expenses as identified in the project plan. So all of those kind of listed above, right. As well as site-specific fine grading, site-specific infrastructure, which includes access roads, water, sewer, electric, gas connections, rail extensions, competitive land pricing, financial assistance, water pretreatment, wastewater pretreatment, and cost specific to industries located and developing within the TIF district. And all expenses, again, will be reviewed by the City and Development Foundation. So again, it's giving us the flexibility to use those dollars within the district in the parameter identified by that sentence that lists the uses.
Gotcha. And I think this would be different than the city appropriating money because you have an outside entity. All of our TIFs that we've done in the past are very specific what those projects are for. When you use terms like cost specific for industries locating and developing in the TIF, that leaves it pretty open in my world of how the funds can be used. Yes, we've got a general guideline. And for me, what the difference is with the general city budget, we have our people in place to do that. We have an administration that we put in place to do that. We're allowing an outside entity who is our partner, and that's been pointed out to me several times, to specifically how that money is going to be used. What would, in their mind, qualify, and as long as it qualified, you know, there's got to be some discussion from the front end. I can't imagine the Development Foundation going out and spending $5 million on something without talking to someone in the city administration first to make sure that that's going to be a qualifying expense. So again, I don't have the big problems. It's just making sure that we're doing our job. And I think this is different than just approving the city's budget. My other question is about funding, and I'm not sure, maybe if you want to do this, or if, I don't know if this is a Development Foundation question, but I need someone to walk through how that it's developer financed. It's still a little fuzzy to me exactly how we get to whether it'll be financed as we go, kind of as a, as it's paid and then the money isn't allocated, but just take me through, because tonight's the first time I heard that it'll all be funded within the first 5 years. And so that's where I'm trying to get a little closer.
Yeah, so I'll maybe hit briefly just on the concept of developer funded. Ultimately, we won't start collecting tax increment for a few years. So the developer has to put the money up front to have these, to basically do these improvements. And if they don't do these improvements, we're not reimbursing funds. So they ultimately have to finance the cost to do these improvements. Once we start to collect increment and we certify that those expenses have incurred, then we distribute the tax increment to them to pay back and pay down their loans. But ultimately, the reason we do developer funded is that if the increment doesn't come in as projected, ultimately they're responsible for their own financing that they've taken out to do those improvements. And if you have questions, I guess, about the time frame of when those improvements will occur and when financing will actually take place for some of them, I probably would direct you to the Development Foundation.
Well, and it looked like Mr. Gray wanted to answer a little bit too. He was going to let you off the hook, and you did a good job before.
Thank you, Councilor. Mike Gray with the Development Foundation. Yeah, I did just, I don't know if it was entirely your question, but I can try to elaborate on the phased development of the park.
Here's what I'm trying to specifically figure out. Who's financing this? Because partially it's cash flow through those first couple of years before you actually need that, the TIF funds, or we're going to need them, or will there be day one, the initial financing in part? Because normally a TIF, either bonds or it's one big offering, maybe 2 or 3 parts. This potentially could be the group of local investors is what we've been saying. So the local banks who've been really great partners to the Development Foundation over the last, well, I was going to say last couple of years, but really the whole length of the foundation. So specifically, how do you see the first draw? Where over that, will it be fully funded within 5 years? Do you think it'll be long? What's the projection as we're going through that financing?
Yeah, so a lot there that I'll try to unpack. So, you know, when you're thinking about some of the TIFs we've done historically here in Sioux Falls, and you look at one project, they're going to take out maybe a construction bond first, and then they take out another loan, and they build the entirety of the project in one swoop in one project. With Foundation Park North, how I would compare it to you, for you, is similar to the Sanford Sports Complex TIF, where over the course of 5 years, that campus was developed for additional development. Similar type of concept here with Foundation Park North, where over the course of 5 years, we will be developing it really as demand drives. So we know that in the first year here, and hopefully starting here in 2021 with the approval of this TIF, we would be able to go out and finance to do initial grading of the full 460 acres. So to get that financing, the Development Foundation goes at risk and takes on that financing. We'll, as we talked about earlier, work to get a competitive bid, and that could most likely, with the amounts we're talking here, will be a consortium of banks in Sioux Falls. You hit a little bit on the partnership between the banking community, the Development Foundation. When Foundation Park was getting started back in 2015, the foundation ran into, the issue of, okay, so we know that we need to establish a large industrial park here in Sioux Falls. The state recognized that as well. So in partnering between the Development Foundation, the state, and the city, they were able to get infrastructure to the park, acquire the land, and a lot of that funding came from the state, came from the city to get the infrastructure there, the Development Foundation using some cash reserves it's had. But then after that point, it was, okay, so now how does the Development Foundation install the infrastructure throughout the park? And it was a very lengthy conversation between Development Foundation, its leadership, and then the banking community to establish that partnership and then figure out how we were going to be able to fund building out the infrastructure for Foundation Park so that we could start attracting those businesses and doing our mission. So first year, 2021, would be grading work. 2022, we would look to start doing roads, water, sewer pipes. 2023, I'd have to go back and take a look at my notes, but it would, some of how it gets developed and when it gets developed really depends on which businesses come, the types of uses they have, and what their needs are. And then just to hit a little bit on the EDCF fund, that Economic Development Competitiveness Fund, from my perspective, when I look at that, I do see it as very well defined. What we're recognizing through that fund is that there are unknown costs with development. And we're recognizing right now that we don't know exactly what those costs are going to be. We did what we could to identify as many costs as we could that we know we would come across, but even with that, we know there are going to be those unknowns, and that's really what that EDCF fund is meant for, is to help us go, okay, if there's something that's unknown that comes up, is there an area that we can tap through the TIF to be able to address that need? So in my mind, it is very specific, but the administration wanted to work with us to give us the flexibility on just what those might be is unknown. So,
thank you. Thanks, Mike. Councilor Neitzer.
I'll just maybe finish up kind of going back over a couple thoughts I had as we were going through this discussion.
Do you have questions, or should we get a motion going here?
We can put a motion on the table. I'll move to approve, or move to second reading.
All right, we got a second for that?
Second, Jensen.
All right, motion by Neitzer, seconded by Jensen to set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2 on this item. Councilor Neitzer, go ahead.
Yeah, obviously our major roles would be setting policy, and then execution goes through the administration, and then we have the oversight. So I think really it comes down to trying to get a comfort level with the wording in that contract. That's really the policy part. Are we okay with that? And then thinking about what the oversight would be. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, if we wanted to maybe have a counselor on some small group or something like that that looks these over, that may be appropriate. But I want to be careful about not overstepping into getting into essentially micromanaging. Oversight could look more like keeping an eye on these things when it comes to things like annual reports or audits and things like that. As was stated, we appropriate a lot of money every year, but that's why we have things like audits for oversight. So there might be a middle ground that we could think about. I guess maybe the only other question I had was that language said financial assistance, and I guess I'd be curious what that means to, what that would mean. And yeah, sure, Mike. And I mean, is that the company says, I want, this other city's offering us $2 million in cash, and if you give us 3, we'll come? I mean, is it, what does that look like?
Thank you, Councilor. Mike Gray with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation. When I proposed to put that terminology, that language in there, what I was really drawing back on was a project that we worked on a number of years ago where we were working to recruit a business here. we were competing against other communities, and this company said, well, hey, we would consider Sioux Falls, but we want to do a study of the area, whether it's an environmental study or a labor study. Would you guys be willing to help contribute the cost towards that study so that it just gives us a little bit more reason to consider you guys and not scratch you off the list? So at the time, the way, again, in my mind, drawing back on a previous provision that was in the agreement between the city and the Development Foundation, there used to be $100,000 identified as part of a special projects fund. And that was the source of funds that the Development Foundation approached the city and said, hey, in working with this company to try to recruit them here, they would like some assistance in paying for this study. Would that be an appropriate use of the special projects fund? The city agreed. And then through the agreement that had been approved by the city council with the $100,000 line item in there, that became an expense through that special projects fund, and then we helped pay for that study. So that would be the financial assistance. At least that was the scenario that I drew on for that.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Sale and then Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here's my take on this. It's a huge amount of money that we're looking at here, and there's $30 million that we're talking about. Now, I don't want to get into the council approving the slump rate of the concrete, but this is probably our only shot at any kind of regulation or any kind of oversight on that $30 million. We can't close the barn door once the horse is out. So I would appreciate in the next 2 weeks if there would be further discussion about what limited role we could play in some sort of oversight of that money. And I think that would make us all feel a lot better going forward. I thoroughly intend to support this now, even though it's still a little bit uncomfortable. Hopefully that in 2 weeks we can have some resolution. The trust that I think that the Development Foundation has built up and the Planning Department has built up for me goes a long ways to this. But unfortunately, guess what? We won't be here in 20 years. At least, I don't think you guys are going to still be there in 20 years. I hope we're all gone. But the next generation of young men will still be here working on this. So this is kind of our only shot. That's why there's a lot of questions. I fully intend to support. I think it's great for the growth of Sioux Falls, and people are looking that far forward. And this could take us to the next level. And I'm super excited about that.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Selberg, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think communication is key. It sure breaks down a lot of walls and tension. And I don't want to get to where this goes sometimes with these conversations like there's, something nefarious or ill intent going on. I don't think there is. As far as the lines of communication, I believe we've all had the opportunity to sit down with you over the last couple of months, both individually. I believe you've been in front of us as a group now. The unusual process coming in through informationals and doing it this way as well. So, there is a fine line in oversight, as Councilor Neitzer said, as far as how in the weeds do we get in micromanaging. Then again, if there's questions, we need to ask them, and I would encourage every councilor, if you've got some, to reach out and be asking your questions as well. I think there has been a pretty good trust relationship between the group. And I guess when I talk about me, I would tell people, and maybe somebody else feels the same out there who's listening about TIFs, keep it as simple as possible just on the explanation. I know it certainly helps for me, and I think you had just said something to the effect about when you talk about TIFs historically and then you talked about this, that works beautifully for me because then tie it into what's been done in the past. Tie into your success stories before of TIFs and how they were a success. And this 30 million ties into similar to the 5 to 10 million in the same way it was done on this project. If you break it into things like that and simple it in with things like that, at least for me, I kind of go, okay, well, that kind of makes some sense and it's easier for me to digest. So I think a lot of times people out there see numbers and they hear stories and they hear whatever. I think as simple as you can make it and tell stories about what's happened in the past, this is why we do things this way, I think it goes a long ways to kind of breaking through some of this. So I think some of the concerns are valid. Councilor Sale, Councilor Neitzer, Councilor Starr asked some great questions. I am quite confident that when we have these questions, you'll come up with answers for us and we'll move along from there. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor. All right, we got a motion and a second on the floor. Any final discussion here? All right.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Kiley, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to state, because I don't believe that it was really answered in the slide that Dustin put on following Counselor Starr's follow-up, didn't really identify the criteria within the $30 million Economic Development Competitiveness Fund. That is where I understood there was identified criteria that had to be met in order for it to be an eligible expense within that fund. And I do agree with Counselor Sale that we could have a better, a clearer identification what are eligible expenses within that $30 million versus just potential uses that are identified in the 3 bullet points on the PowerPoint. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Counselor. All right, I'm hearing no further discussion, so we'll take a vote on the motion to send this to second reading.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg, yes. Sale, Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move to item 46, please.
Item 46, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, rezoning property located north of East 69th Street and east of South Sycamore Avenue from the AG Agriculture to the POPUD Pedestrian-Oriented Plan Unit Development, RD1, Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban and RS Single Family Residential Suburban Districts, to the RD2 Townhome Residential Suburban District, RA3 Apartment Residential High Density District, C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District, and C4 Commercial Regional Districts number 13645-2020, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. Planning Commission recommends approval 4-0. Recommendation set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Private applicant, Ronning Enterprises Incorporated, Chuck Point.
Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Jason Bieber with Planning and Development Services. This is an application and the owner is Ronning Enterprises. It is located north of East 69th Street and east of South Sycamore Avenue. It's about 44.7 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is the applicant is looking at constructing a future residential office and commercial development.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Councilors, got any questions for Jason on this one?
Move approval.
Second, Sale.
All right, motion by Selberg, seconded by Sale to send this to a second reading on Tuesday, March 2. Any discussion here? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg, yes. Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Next item.
Item 47, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, rezoning property located north of West 49th Street and east of South Grange Avenue from the I-1 Light Industrial District to the RA3 Apartment Residential High Density District, number 13647-2020, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. Planning Commission recommends approval 4-0. Recommendation set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Private applicant, REM Construction Services, Paul Reynolds.
The applicant here is Paul Reynolds. The owner is MBLB LLC. This is located north of West 49th Street and east of South Grange Avenue, just southeast of Costco. It's about 7.3 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is to construct a 4-story apartment complex with roughly 100 units on the northern portion of the lot.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public who would like to speak on this one tonight? Council, do you have questions for Jason here?
Move approval.
Second, Sale.
Motion by Selberg, seconded by Sale to send this to a second reading on Tuesday, March 2. Any discussion, Council? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote on it, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg, yes. Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Next item, please.
Item 48, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, rezoning property located at 702 South Duluth Avenue from the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District to the RT2 Townhome Residential Traditional District Number 13655-2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. Planning Commission recommends approval 4-0. Recommendation, set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Private applicant, Aaron George Properties. Aaron George.
The applicant and owner here is Aaron George. It's located at 702 South Duluth Avenue. It's about 0.15 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is we're looking at correcting the zoning with the current use of the property. It's been a 3-unit converted house for some time.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public who would like to speak on this one? Councilors, any questions for Jason here?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Starr, go ahead.
Thank you. Jason, how does a single-family house get converted to a triplex without zoning being updated?
It was probably done a while ago under the old ordinance. And as we know, when 2014 hit with the Shea Places, there were some properties that were zoned single-family under the old ordinance that were also multifamily uses. And so when we converted them over, we converted them as single-family. Typically, we find these when the owner or applicant comes in to pull building permits and they're not zoned correctly, so we make sure we go back through the old permits and make sure everything was done legally, and then we identify them and then have them come in then to rezone it.
Thank you.
Other questions for Jason tonight on this one? I'll look for a motion here.
Move approval.
Second, Sale.
All right, motion by Selberg, seconded by Councilor Sale to move this to a second reading on Tuesday, March 2. Any discussion here? Hearing none, let's take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg. Yes. Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Item 49, please.
Item 49, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, rezoning property located south of West Maple Street and west of North Marion Road from the AG Agriculture District to the CN Conservation RS Single Family Residential Suburban, RE2 Townhome Residential Suburban, LW Live Work, RA3 Apartment Residential, High Density and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar Districts number 13657-2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. Planning Commission recommends approval 4-0. Recommendation, set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Private applicants, Norman Engineering Incorporated, Aaron Norman.
The applicant here is Aaron Norman. The owner is the Sester Family Trust. It's located at the southwest corner of West Maple Street and North Marion Road. It's just west of where Jefferson High School is going to be. It's about 152 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is they're looking at constructing a future residential office and commercial development on the 152 acres.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item tonight? Council, any questions here?
Move approval.
Second, Sale.
All right, motion by Selberg, seconded by Councilor Sale to send this to second reading on Tuesday, March 2. Any discussion on that? All right, let's take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert.
Yes.
Selberg. Yes. Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Item 50.
Item 50, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, rezoning property located at 209 South Spring Avenue from the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District to the RT2 Townhome Residential Traditional District, number 13671-2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. Planning Commission recommends approval 4-0. Recommendation, set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Private applicant, the Gathering Place LLC, Cindy Tripp.
The applicant and owner here is Cindy Tripp. This is located at 209 South Spring Avenue. It's about 0.15 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is the applicant was running what she calls the Gathering Place, a small event hall, and now she's looking at retiring out of that, and she has found someone to actually buy the actual building and convert it back into a house. So.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item? Councilors, do you have any questions on this one? Look for a motion. Set a date of second reading for Tuesday, March 2.
So move.
Second, Nitzert.
All right, motion by Sale and second by Nitzert on that. Any discussion here, council? All right, let's take a vote on it, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg. Yes. Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. We'll move to item 51.
Item 51, a resolution of intent to enter into a lease of municipal real property, various leases, sponsors the mayor.
Stacy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Every year, the city contemplates entering into multiple leases, properties owned by the city for private tenants. And pursuant to South Dakota Codified Law 9-12-5.2, anytime those are over 120 days or $500 in annual value, they must come before the city council on a resolution, which is what this is. And in the event that the council decides to pass this resolution, what that does is it authorizes the city then to negotiate those leases, and those would come back before the council for the council's approval. There are 43 properties listed herein, and those are available online if you're interested in reviewing any particular properties.
All right, thanks, Stacy. Anyone from the public who would like to speak to this item here? Councilors, you got any questions for Mr. Koister on this?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Starr.
if I could ask Attorney Koistra, how does this qualify as not more than one item when there's 43 different properties that are unique? I don't want to sit through 43 individual resolutions.
That's the alternative. No, I mean, they're all the same thing again, and they do come back individually. This, in the interest of efficiency, itemizes all of them for purposes of the resolution, but they're not contract approvals.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions for Stacy here? Look for a motion on this one.
Move approval, Nitzert?
All right, motion by Nitzert, seconded by Sale to approve here. Any discussion, council? We'll take a vote, Tom.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. 52, please.
Item 52, a resolution approving the release of a permanent sanitary sewer easement located in lots 6 and 7 in Block 1 of Timberline Estates, second addition to the city of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County, South Dakota. Private applicant Gary Haar.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Assistant City Engineer Kurt Peppel. The easement in question is in northeast Sioux Falls, just south of Rice Street and along North Cleveland Avenue. No utilities exist. It's a little difficult to see. There is a fairly wide easement. There's the yellow area on both sides of that easement. There's a 2-foot strip that has been requested that we release, and we've looked at it and we're okay with that release. Approval of the easement release will aid in the development of the adjacent lots, and engineering requests your support and approval.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Anyone from the public here to speak on this one tonight? Councilors, do you have any questions for Kurt here?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Just quick, Kurt, thank you for waiting till the very end. One of these weeks, I'm going to move your last one to the beginning, so your son was awesomely behaved this evening, and thank you for coming. He should get one of the merit badges that our Boy Scouts got earlier for being here for local government. Thanks.
No question?
No, that's as good as I get.
Nothing for him. He'd be happy to come.
Actually,
answer.
can you tell me the difference between a retention pond and a detention pond? That seems to be my standard question for interns.
He's saying wrap it up.
We'll get back to you on that.
We're moving on.
All right, any questions for Kurt here? All right, look for a motion on this item.
Move approval, Sale.
Second, Starr.
All right, motion by Sale, seconded by Starr to approve 52. Any discussion here? All right, let's take a vote, please.
Council members Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg. Yes. Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Jensen,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Next item, please.
Item 54, a resolution advising and giving consent to the appointment of members to certain citizen boards, those being Carrie Benz, Falls Community Health Center Governing Board, and Adam Emerson, Library Board of Trustees.
Adam is here tonight, man. You stayed for the whole meeting. Thanks for being here. Adam is filling in for Allie Hartzler, who was on our library board and then became an employee of the city of Sioux Falls. So I haven't seen Adam probably since I've been mayor. We used to work out together, and I don't get there much anymore. So thank you for your deciding to serve. We appreciate you being here and seeing how we make the sausage, but you don't have to come to every meeting. It's not a requirement of being on the board, except the library meetings. So thanks, Adam. We appreciate you, man. All right. Any questions on either of these folks? I look for a motion to approve Adam and Carrie.
Move approval.
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Selberg, seconded by Sale to approve these folks. Let's take a vote on that, please.
Council members Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg? Yes. Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Jensen?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
All right. That passes 7-0. Any new business tonight, council? All right. Hearing none, we'll move to general public input. As a reminder, input during this portion will last no more than 3 minutes per person. And the public's welcome to speak on any topic that did not appear earlier in the agenda. So at this time, I'd like to invite anyone forward for general public input. Good evening.
Sarah, Sioux Falls. The reason why I came up here for the consent agenda is because we need to start pulling when we're talking about giving money to the Bishop Dudley and that. People was out here wanting to speak about where that $120,000 came from. So if we put on the consent agenda, I wanted it pulled so we can have those questions answered. So we need to make sure that we do that because it is the people's taxpayers' money paying at $120,000 for the Bishop Dudley. I'm working on a diocese. We're going to get Madeline out of there, just like I got Chad out too of the diocese, if we cannot pick up this shelter here. If Madeline can't do her job, then I will have her removed too. I should not have to sit here and get sex offenders on felonies with the police department. The shelter needs to be more active with the police department on their sex offenders and their pedophiles. We need to be the eyes and the ears for the police on sex offenders and pedophiles. They are supposed to know there are sex offenders and their pedophiles in their facility. I'm not going to get into details until he gets arrested, but it's very disturbing. I'm going to be working behind closed doors with the diocese to get Madeline out if she doesn't do what she's supposed to be doing, because I'm sick and tired of it.
Mr. Mayor, this was on the agenda earlier tonight. If our rule is you can't talk about agenda items, then you need to move on.
If you want to move on, we can move on. I have no concerns, but you want to
either the rule is you can talk about agenda items or you can't. So if we're going to enforce it.
Go ahead, finish.
So we need to make sure that we need to make sure that the shelter is run correctly and that it's not a nuisance to the police department here. I can't stress it enough. I'm not going to get on any boards with the city because the boards, when you get on the city, your mouth is shut. People can't come up here and talk about stuff when you're on boards with the city, just like council members cannot come up here and talk because you're controlled and isolated. So me being on city boards, it's not going to happen either because you are controlled to keep your mouth shut. So I will work with the diocese on getting Madeline out of there if she cannot come into compliance. But I'm telling you what, I talked to the detective today. We need to make sure that we're better educating with the sex offenders coming in and out of that facility. It's taken away a lot of people's taxpayers' money when it could have been easily communicated with law enforcement.
All right, thank you. Good evening.
Tim Stanga. Oh, the way it looks as the mask mandate's going to be coming up here shortly. And you can just already hear that they're going to look at it and they're going to say, oh, look at what the masks do. Look at the numbers. mask, do everything to keep the numbers down, and the sad part about it is you can't even come up with anything on that. Because the way the CDC and Dr. Fauci says is you should be wearing 2 masks, not just one. Who are you going to listen to next time? CDC absolutely does not know half of the time of what they're talking about. They contradict everything that they talk about, and anything that they mandatory come up, tell how the school should be run, that you can be able to open up a school, you should be able to do this, but yet half of the schools are still closed. Do you listen to the CDC? Absolutely not. Dr. Fauci, one guy running this in the whole world, and we got to listen to that guy? That's just like playing Russian roulette. This so-called virus that we have should just run its course. And that's what it's doing. But it's still killing our people. I had a buddy of mine that sat underneath his bed for 11 months. 11 months because you guys had him so afraid to come out of his house. He fell down, broke his shoulder, died 3 days later of cancer all the way through his body. He can't get that 11 months back because he ended up dying. And why? Because you guys put fear into him. It's sickening on what you guys do to the people of Sioux Falls. Sick. Because there's a lot of people that are still sitting in their houses that haven't been out for a year, that haven't seen any of their relatives. And why? Because of sick people that we put on the city council that have to drag in their emotions and drag in that I have daughters that are nurses and blah, blah, blah. I really don't care because they're doing their job they went to school for. Just like I go out and do my job every day. But I'm not going to wear a mask.
All right, anyone else tonight? Come on up. Good evening, Mike.
Mike Ziz, Sioux Falls. Might as well end on a good note. Well, I thought about this for a while, and I got thinking of some of the things that I'm encouraged about what the mayor says. Well, how about coming up in a month or so, something we can talk about in the future? How about we create a resolution, try to be nice to people? But I like to promote the mayor's mentor program a little bit more. Things like that. What if we create like I call it a healthy lifestyle ordinance, where we all kind of agree to respect each other's rights, acknowledge everybody for the difference of opinion. With all the stuff you see in the media, social media, the national politics, we should take the mayor's lead and encourage people to be respectful and honor everybody's difference of opinion. I mean, the mayor has some really good things he's working on. I think we should do a resolution, something like that, and we can try to get people to respect each other again. I don't know what you can call it, but just be respectful for people. I'd be gladly to take up the mayor out, be part of his mentor program. So we got to do that. It builds leadership and gives our children something to think of in the future, and go from there. So if you can, I don't want to tie this in with the mask mandates and stuff like that, but going forward, if we did something like this, maybe we give the mayor a little more guidance on working with the people in the community, businesses, schools, stuff like that, instead of all this hatred that you see online and stuff like that. Yeah, you're doing a good job with the mentor program, so we should do more to promote that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. Anyone else this evening for public input? All right, seeing none, look for a motion to adjourn us.
So moved, Neitzer.
Second.
Good. Motion by Neitzer, seconded by Sale. Can we take a roll call vote on that, Tom?
Council members Neitzer.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
Kylie.
All right, it's good enough. 6-0, we're adjourned. See ya.